of all, I'd like to say I'm not representing the FBI. Anything I say is not supported by the FBI or the opinions of the FBI. These are my own personal opinions. What I am about to read to you, I had submitted for a pre-publication review, and it was approved, and this was back in February. Since August of 1999, I've been working to legally expose the very real and foreseeable Middle Eastern terrorist threats to American citizens at home and abroad. From 1993 to 1999, I was assigned to the Chicago Division's Counterterrorism Task Force. In this capacity, I became familiar with the techniques used by international terrorist organizations to surreptitiously launder money in and out of the United States, including through the use of domestic financial institutions in support of terrorist and paramilitary activities and operations in the United States and abroad, including the State of Israel and elsewhere. Against the wishes of some at the FBI in 1995, when I uncovered criminal violations of several of my cases, I promptly initiated active terrorism criminal investigations on these subjects. I developed probable cause to believe that some of these transfers or transmissions have been of money intended to be used in the support of domestic and international terrorism activities. The illegal transfers have supported specific terrorist activities involving the extortion, kidnapping, and murder of at least one Israeli citizen. The successful investigation, which was codenamed Vulgar Betrayal, V-U-L-G-A-R, Betrayal, led to the June 1998 seizure of $1.4 million of Middle Eastern terrorist funding. The seizure was the first occasion that the United States government utilized the civil forfeiture laws to seize assets in the United States. These funds were linked directly to Saudi businessman Yasin al-Qadi. On October 12, 2001, approximately 1 month after the attack, Yasin al-Qadi was designated by the United States government as a financial supporter of Osama Bin Laden. Despite the unqualified success of the investigation of the Middle Eastern terrorist, FBI management failed to take seriously the threat of terrorism in the United States. Specifically, FBI management intentionally and repeatedly thwarted and obstructed my attempts to launch a more comprehensive investigation to identify and to neutralize terrorists. The FBI's lack of support for the Vulgar Betrayal investigation was obvious to my new supervisor in 1998, who after only 4 months of being on the squad wrote, quote, "Agent Wright has spearheaded this effort despite an embarrassing lack of investigative resources available to the case, such as computers, financial leak analysis software, and a team of financial analysts. Although far from being concluded, the success of this investigation so far has been entirely due to the foresight and perseverance of Agent Wright." Close quote.
1996, Vulgar Betrayal, the most significant U.S. government investigation into terrorist financing before 9/11, is launched. This investigation grows out of investigators Chicago FBI agent Robert Wright had begun in 1993, and Wright appears to be the driving force behind Vulgar Betrayal. He later will say, "I named the case Vulgar Betrayal because of the many gross betrayals many Arab terrorists and their supporters committed against the United States." But the name will later prove to be bitterly ironic for him. Over a dozen FBI agents are assigned to it, and a grand jury is impaneled to hear evidence. Wright will be removed from the investigation in late '99, and it will be completely shut down in early 2000. The investigation will first identify suspected terrorism financier Yasin al-Qadi as a target in 1997, but it will run into many obstacles in investigating him and others. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Fleissner, the lead prosecutor for Vulgar Betrayal, will later claim that supervisors at the Department of Justice headquarters obstructed the investigation because it appeared to trace terrorism financing to important figures in Saudi Arabia, a key U.S. ally. Wright will later state that the leads into al-Qadi and others have been fully investigated. "I believe the FBI could have identified other significant links to Osama bin Laden, links which may have been addressed to prevent future attacks against the United States by bin Laden and his terrorist trainees." Just a few months later, Wright begins investigating two known Hamas suspects believed to be residing in the Chicago area. He asks a relief supervisor whether he has any information about these suspects. The relief supervisor says he does not. Wright, however, spends several weeks investigating the location of these two terrorist suspects, only to later learn the relief supervisor not only knew one of the suspects had been arrested overseas in 1995 as a result of terrorist activities, but that he had placed a copy of a statement provided by the arrest terrorist to overseas authorities in an obscure location where no one would find it. Wright will make this claim in a 1995 court case. He will later allege that this is just one instance of FBI supervisors withholding information from his Vulgar Betrayal investigation. One suspect who seems to fit the description of one of the two suspects is Chicago resident Mohammed Jana Hilmi Jarad. He was arrested in Israel in 1995, confessed to being a Hamas operative, then was released and returned to live in Chicago. However, in April of 98, Robert Wright will later recall at this time he is pleasantly surprised when FBI management provides his Vulgar Betrayal investigation with a 10-year veteran to assist with his efforts. According to Wright, the unnamed agent is assigned to investigate a company and its 20-plus subsidiaries which were linked to a major financier of international terrorism. However, Wright and his fellow agent, John Vincent, will soon become dismayed when they realize the agent is not actually doing any work. He merely shuffles papers to look busy when people walk by. He will continue to do no work on this important assignment until the Vulgar Betrayal investigation is effectively shut down. Wright will later claim in 2003 the important assignment he was given involved both the founder and the financier of PTEC. Presumably, these could be references to Osama Ziande, the president and chief founder of PTEC, and Yasin al-Qadi, apparently PTEC's largest investor. On June 9th, 1998, FBI agent Robert Wright, apparently frustrated that his Vulgar Betrayal investigation is not allowed to criminally charge Hamas operative Mohammed Salah and Saudi multi-millionaire Yasin al-Qadi, gets a court date to seize $1.4 million in bank accounts and a Chicago house Salah owns. Wright says in the suit that the money is linked directly to al-Qadi, would be destined for terrorist activities. Wright uses a civil forfeiture law that has been frequently used to seize properties and funds of drug dealers or gangsters, but had never been used for accused terrorists. Salah had living in Chicago since his release from an Israeli prison in November of 1997. A highly detailed affidavit tracks wire transfers from the United States and Switzerland to specific Hamas attacks in Israel. Al-Qadi's money was deposited in bank accounts controlled by Salah, who was called an important courier and financial agent for Hamas. Then Salah invested the money in BMI Incorporated, a real estate investment firm with ties to many suspected terrorism financiers. Some of the money is eventually withdrawn by Salah, brought to the West Bank, and given to Hamas operatives there. Salah denies the charge and says all the transfers were for charitable causes. Al-Qadi also claims innocence. However, federal court judge agreed to the defendant's request for a stay order, and the suit is said to languish in the Chicago federal court. The funds remain frozen, and Salah continues to live in his house. During the summer of 2001, the government would negotiate with Salah to settle the civil case, and according to court records, the Justice Department will even move ahead with plans to return $1.4 million that Wright had seized from al-Qadi just months earlier. But the transfer will be set for October of 2001, and the 9/11 attacks came first, prompting wiser minds at Justice to squash the move. But also in 2000, the parents of a U.S. teenager said to have been killed by a Hamas attack in Israel will sue Salah and others for damage based on this investigation, and they will win the suit in 2004. The U.S. government will finally arrest Salah in 2004 and charge him for many of the same offenses described in this 1998 case. As of the end of 2005, al-Qadi had not been charged with any crime. Just 2 months after the U.S. Embassy bombings in Tanzania in Africa in 1998 and Kenya, Wright and his Vulgar Betrayal investigation discovered evidence that they think Saudi multimillionaire Yasin al-Qadi to the bombings. However, since 1997, Wright had been investigated as a suspected terrorist cell in Chicago that was connected to fundraising for Hamas. They discovered that they considered to be clear proof that al-Qadi and other people were already investigating to help fund the embassy bombings. Wright asks FBI headquarters for permission to open an investigation into this money trail at this time, but the permission is not granted. Wright will later recall the supervisor who was there from headquarters was right straight across from me and started yelling at me, "You will not open a criminal investigation. I forbid any of you. You will not open criminal investigations against any of these intelligence subjects." Instead, they were told to merely follow the suspects and file reports, but make no arrests. Federal prosecutor Mark Fleshner, working with the Vulgar Betrayal investigation, later will claim that a strong criminal case was building against al-Qadi and his associates. There were powers bigger than I in the Justice Department and within the FBI that simply were not going to let that happen. And it didn't happen. I think there were very serious mistakes made. And I think it perhaps cost people their lives ultimately. Fleshner later will speculate that Saudi influence may have played a role. ABC News will report in 2002, according to U.S. officials, al-Qadi had close personal and business connections with the Saudi royal family. Wright later will allege that FBI headquarters even attempted to shut down the Vulgar Betrayal investigation altogether at this time. He said they wanted to kill it. However, he will later claim, fortunately, an assistant special agent in Chicago interceded to prevent FBI headquarters from closing Vulgar Betrayal. He claimed that a new supervisor will write in late 1998 that Agent Wright had spearheaded this effort despite embarrassing lack of investigative resources available to the case, such as computers, financial analysis software, and a team of financial analysts. Although far from being concluded, the success of this investigation so far has been entirely due to the foresight and perseverance of Agent Wright. When the story of this interface and the alleged al-Qadi embassy bombings connections will be reported in late 2002, Wright will conclude, September the 11th is a direct result of the incompetence of the FBI's International Terrorism Unit. No doubt about that. Apparently, no doubt about that. You can't know the things I know and not go public. Wright will remain prohibited from telling all he knows, merely hinting, there's so much more. God, there's so much more, a lot more. In late 99, Gamal Abdul Hafiz, the only Muslim FBI agent in those years just prior to 9/11, becomes involved in the FBI agent Robert Wright's Vulgar Betrayal investigation in early of that year. An accountant working for BMI Incorporated, an investment firm with connections to many suspected terrorism financiers, tells Abdul Hafiz that he is worried that BMI funds have helped fund the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings in Africa. BMI President Solomon Bihari hears that Abdul Hafiz has been told about this and wants to meet with him to discuss it, apparently without realizing that Abdul Hafiz is an undercover FBI agent. Wright asks Abdul Hafiz to wear a wire to the meeting, but Hafiz refuses to do so. This leads to infighting with the FBI. On July 6, 1999, Abdul Hafiz files a religious discrimination complaint accusing Wright of making derogatory comments to fellow agents. On March 21st of 2000, Wright makes a formal internal complaint about Abdul Hafiz. FBI agent Barry Carmody seconds Wright's complaint. Wright and Carmody accuse Abdul Hafiz of hindering investigations by openly refusing to record other Muslims. In an affidavit, Wright claims that Abdul Hafiz refused to wear the wire based on religious reasonings, saying a Muslim doesn't record another Muslim. Abdul Hafiz does not deny the quote, but claims it was taken out of context. Federal prosecutor Mark Fleshner and other FBI agents back up the allegations against Abdul Hafiz. Carmody will also claim that in a different investigation, Abdul Hafiz hindered an inquiry into the possible ties to Islamic militants of fired University of South Florida professor Sami al-Aran by refusing to record a conversation with the professor in 1998. Complaints to superiors and headquarters about Abdul Hafiz never get a response. Far from being reprimanded, in February of 2001, Abdul Hafiz is promoted to one of the FBI's most important anti-terrorism posts, the American embassy in Saudi Arabia to handle investigations for the FBI in that Muslim country. In 2003, FBI agent John Vincent will complain. 5 different FBI field divisions complained of this agent's activities, and the FBI headquarters response was to promote him to a sensitive position in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Later, Abdul Hafiz will be suspended in February of 2003 over charges that he faked a break-in of his own house in order to collect $25,000 in insurance benefits and then failed an FBI polygraph test when asked about it. In January of 2004, the FBI's Disciplinary Review Board will reinstate him after deciding there was insufficient evidence in the case. On August 3rd of 1999, Robert Wright is abruptly removed from the Vulgar Betrayal investigation into terrorism financing. The entire investigation apparently winds down without his involvement and will shut down altogether in August of 2000. A New York Post article will state, the official reason was a fear that Wright's work would disrupt FBI intelligence gathering. My sources find this dubious. After years of monitoring these individuals, the Bureau had likely learned all it could. But conversations with FBI personnel indicate that he was told informally that his work was too embarrassing to the Saudis. In support of this, the fact that Wright was shut down as he seemed to be closing in on Yasin al-Qadi. Wright will later claim that a reason he is given for being taken off the investigation is a recent dispute he is having with Abdul Hafiz refusing to wear a wire. He is also accused of sexually harassing a female FBI agent. This charge is investigated and later dropped. Wright is removed from counterterrorism work altogether and remains that way at least until early of 2002. By September of 99, he will hire Chicago lawyer David Shippers, famed as House investigation counsel in the Clinton impeachment, to help fight the closure of the investigation. Although Shippers is known as an enemy to President Clinton, Wright will say, I'm confident President Clinton had absolutely nothing to do with this lack of support and eventual closure of the Vulgar Betrayal investigation. In March of 2001, Wright is continuing to protest and fight the cancellation of Vulgar Betrayal investigations. Later in early of that year, he claims that he told supervisor, I think it's just better to let sleeping dogs lie. John Vincent backs up the allegation. And by March of 2001, Wright had met with Chicago Special Agent in Charge, Kathleen McChesney. Given that Wright calls the person she and McChesney held that position, he tells her that the International Terrorism Unit of the FBI is a complete joke. Within 3 weeks, the FBI opens another disciplinary investigation on Wright, charging that he had supplied classified information to an assistant U.S. attorney. Wright is later cleared of the charges. In 2002, Wright will later claim, this was a pathetic attempt before the September 11th attacks to further silence me from going public about the FBI's negligence and incompetence. A lawyer speaking for Wright, David Shippers, after 9/11 will later blame Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division, Michael Chertoff, for refusing to take Wright's concerns seriously before 9/11. Chertoff will later be promoted to head the Department of Homeland Security and was the reason for the deporting of 5 Israeli nationals, also labeled the Dancing Israelis. 3 months before 9/11, Wright would write the following, quote, knowing what I know, I can confidently say that until the investigation responsibilities for terrorism are removed from the FBI, I will not feel safe. The FBI has proven for the past decade it cannot identify and prevent acts of terrorism against the United States and its citizens at home or abroad. Even worse, there was virtually no effort on the part of the FBI's International Terrorism Unit to neutralize known and suspected terrorists residing within the United States. End quote. The story of Robert Wright Jr. is echoed from the other FBI whistleblowers like Colleen Rowley, Mark Rossini, Ken Williams, and the warnings that they provided to their superiors in the FBI, which went largely ignored.